Rick, you're ready. It's good to start.
Okay. I'd like to call the Planning Commission virtual regular meeting of Friday, June 12th, 2020 to order, please. Mr. Weber, could you do the roll call? Did we lose Lee?
Yeah. Am I now on?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Trunzo?
Here.
Mr. Covington?
Here.
Mr. Hunker?
Here.
Ms. Matcha?
Here.
Ms. Lucier?
Joyce?
Her screen's frozen right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to Joyce. Mr. Strange?
I'm here.
Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
And Ms. Lucier, are you on? Joyce? Joyce and Mr. Perry?
Here.
We haven't gotten Joyce yet.
No, it looks like her screen is frozen for some reason. I'll try to call her. I hope she doesn't have the phone on mute.
Her camera just went off.
Yeah, I emailed her.
Did you call her cell?
Yep.
Okay. I have that too.
At the tone, please record the message. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or for more options.
Hi, Joyce. Could you log back into the meeting, please? We lost you, your screen. Thank you. It went right into the email, so I suspect she may have it on mute.
Can you hear me?
Joyce?
I'm not on mute.
Okay.
She's moving again.
Yeah. Max, she's muted.
I'm trying to unmute her. It's not on this end. It seems to be her end.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
I guess we can record you as present.
I am.
Okay.
Okay. Let's move forward. Anne, could you do the verification of meeting, please?
The agenda for the Planning Commission regular meeting was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on June 5th. Public notice for partitioning request number 0220-02 for the property located at 21 Saint Lawrence Street was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on May 18th. Notice was published in the Cape Gazette on May 22nd and May 26th. Coast Press on May 27th, Delaware State News on May 27th and May 28th. Notification to property owners within 200 feet was mailed out and signage was posted on the property. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Next item of business is the approval of minutes for the regular meeting held on May 8th, 2020. Have you all had a chance to review those, and are there any comments?
I have not had a chance to review them, but I don't feel like I have to review them before we take action.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on May 8th, 2020?
So moved.
I'll move that we. approve
There a
them.
second?
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Okay.
I'll abstain, if that's okay.
Okay, we have Mr. Trunzo abstaining and everyone else voting in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you.
And correspondence. Let's see, we have one piece of correspondence, I think.
That's particular to the case.
Okay.
There's no general correspondence.
Okay. I think next order of business, then we'll move into old business and conduct the public hearing of partitioning application number 0220-02 for the property located in the R1 zoning district on lot numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, block 34. The address of the property is 21 Saint Lawrence Street. The public hearing has been requested by J. Becker Esquire of the law firm Hudson Jones, Jaywork and Fisher LLC on behalf of CAT SLS LLC, owner of the property. Relina, are you going to do the presentation from the Building and Licensing Department?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And I could be very brief on this. There's not much that has changed between the preliminary hearing and now the public hearing. But for the corrections to the tree that was planted to be removed in the right of way on parcel A, and it's now reflected that it will stay in place, that it is in the right of way, and the relocation of the driveway towards the east, which was closer to the corner on parcel A as well. With that said, there's nothing else that has changed in my report between the preliminary hearing and now the public hearing report.
Okay, my recollection is that were the two items we requested some clarification on. Mr. Becker, do you have anything to present in connection with this partitioning?
Am I off mute? I believe I am now.
Yep, you're on.
Excellent. Sorry about that. Yes, sir. If I may, please, I'll try to keep it relatively brief because I know that you have a heck of an agenda today. If I may, members of the Planning Commission, Mr. Mandalis, ladies, gentlemen of the public, good afternoon. Again, for the record, I'm Jay Becker, and I'm a partner with the law firm Hudson Jones, Jaywork and Fisher in Rehoboth Beach. I am, in fact, here on behalf of CAT SLS LLC, owner of the property known as 21 Saint Lawrence, which lies on the corner of Saint Lawrence and King Charles within the city. Members of CAT SLS LLC against the record are Constance Jones, Ashley Phillips, and Tracy Bolivar. With me today in my office is Constance Jones. Tracy Bolivar was supposed to be here, but she ran into an unexpected matter, but she is here by telephone with me as well. I have Mr. Jeff Garrison, principal of Garrison Homes here also. I would, again, like to start today like I did last time and yet again say thank you to the staff and to y'all as well for making this possible. Again, I know these things are not easy, and I thank you for your efforts. I wish all my hearings could go forward like this one can, but I'm still waiting for quite a few of them to be scheduled. Again, I don't have much to add. Mr. Molina, in his original report, I think stated forward that we do, in fact, I believe, meet the technical requirements for the partition. Our lot being 100 foot by 100 foot square, which can be into 250 by 100 foot lots, each containing the required 5,000 square feet of space. Lot coverage and FAR at this point are moot, as a condition of our approval, if granted, would be to remove the currently existing structures on the property. My clients are very much aware of the fact that any future improvements placed on the partition lots, if approved, would be pursuant to the consultation and approval and issuance of permits by the building inspector's office. As a housekeeping measure, real quickly, I'd like to go ahead and incorporate our discussions contained in the prior May 8th hearing. In addition, I would like to point out that I did, in fact, successfully X the box which said this thing is, in fact, an application for a partition, which I'd forgotten last time. So I appreciate you allowing me to do that. Mr. Molina properly stated we did submit 3 surveys. The first 2 attempt to show the projected effect that placing houses on the lots would have on the tree situation if they were facing St. Lawrence, and again, if they were facing King Charles Avenue. The last survey was a response to Mr. Molina's comments to me, and that was where we did in fact remove the TBR, or to be removed notation on a tree on city right away. If it's not ours, we're not removing it. And also, I moved the proposed driveway curb cut on one of the lots, the corner lot, closer to the ocean by approximately 4.5 feet. Again, as a result of his concern. Please note that any improvements shown on those proposed lots, proposed partition lots, are purely for illustration purposes. We understand completely that they are not being approved here today. They are not finalized. Again, they're for illustrative purposes only. Again, we don't want to say otherwise. We moved the curb cut primarily just to show our ready willingness to comply with any requests to come out of the building inspector's office. Zipping through. Also, as we discussed during the preliminary hearing, our property, I do believe, qualifies for administrative, quote unquote, over-the-counter partition as it stands. Our application is filed, however, again, because we're seeking to pivot, if you will, or rotate the lots 90 degrees, again, so that they'd front St. Lawrence as opposed to King Charles. In this, our application is very similar, in fact, to the one that Mr. Robertson posed at 208 Scarborough last month. Our request, we believe, has essentially 3 benefits to the city. I went into more detail during our May 8th hearing. Again, I don't want to waste too much of your time, but I'd like to touch on them very briefly here, if I may. The first is we believe our request is less disruptive, pardon me, sorry, less disruptive of the current status of the neighborhood. Specifically, our currently existing house at 21 St. Lawrence is, as the address might suggest, fronting Saint Lawrence Street, despite the fact that the lots are plotted the other direction. Therefore, if approved, and if we were to subsequently obtain permits to construct houses on the newly partitioned lots, we would be adding, if you will, 1 net address or house to Saint Lawrence Street. If we were to go with the quote unquote over-the-counter partition, we would be adding 2 net houses to King Charles. While not dispositive in itself, as indicated in our May 8th hearing, my clients did in fact speak to the 2 immediate adjoiners of the property, and neither one of them seemed to have any issues. That there's been, to this point, to my knowledge anyway, no correspondence and no vocalized opposition lodged would indicate, or at least would buttress our argument that the neighborhood itself is not being detrimentally burdened. The second proposed benefit of our partition closely mirrors the first, and that is indicated currently. There is 1 curb cut servicing our property at 21, which goes off of St. Lawrence Street. Again, we would be seeking, if we were to partition, if we were to build 2 curb cuts, obviously on St. Lawrence, i.e. a net increase of 1, if you will, between the currently existing. That, of course, would be different from the 2 curb cuts that a similar project, if pursued, would have on King Charles. We believe that King Charles is more arterial in nature. Perhaps it's technically a connector road, I guess, whereas St. Lawrence, being a dead end at that point street into the ocean, is, I think, technically a minor street. We believe that additional curb cuts on a minor street would be more beneficial to the general traffic flow of the city, as opposed to 2 curb cuts onto, again, an arterial or connector road, I should say. Finally, the third point, as I intimated a little while ago, when I was talking about the surveys that we supplemented our application with, if we are to subdivide the lots and orient them on St. Lawrence as requested here, those surveys show that project would have an overall better effect if you believe better is to keep more trees up, effect than to orient them onto King Charles. I believe that looking at our drawings, preliminary, again, nothing is finalized until the building, A, until we apply, and B, until the building inspector says they're finalized. But the suggestion is that we'd be able to save approximately a net 5 trees. I will point out that you know, the desire here for my clients to continue to occupy that corner lot long-term, forever and ever, they kept those trees there. They want those trees. They don't wish to remove those trees, and they are hoping that we can keep those trees. Again, this is continuous ownership. I do want to touch on one thing that was raised in the preliminary hearing, if I may, real quickly, and that is that there was some concern voiced as to the agreement that I included in the application. I thought for transparency purposes. The intent of providing that document to the commission was to try to explain what my clients were truly trying to accomplish. 4 people inherited this property, and is often the case when multiple people inherit a property, one of them, frankly, doesn't want to continue as a joint owner. The 3 people, the cat, Constance, Ashley, and Tracy, want to stay. The 4th does not. So my clients were faced with an unfortunate situation, and that is either figure out some way how to take care of the 4th member, or to sell out and leave Rehoboth with their families. That's not what they want to do. So this is an attempt, essentially, at correcting an estate plan. Sorry, keep it on here. It is important to note, by the way, that agreement as it exists is still being negotiated in terms of particulars as far as you know, what is actually going to be built, if ever anything, and as to pricing as well. It is a basic settled tenet of law that price and particularity of what is being conveyed have to be established. In this case, neither is. We believe that what we're trying to do is within the spirit and intention of the city code, and we don't believe that it is meant to prohibit what we're trying to do here. In closing, quickly, we believe our applicant does in fact meet the requirements in our application for a partition of our lot, and we do pray that this commission will look favorably upon that application and grant us permission to move forward. At this point, I'll stop talking, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments?
This is Rachel. I'll just make a comment. Since I'm on the Plant, Shade, and Tree Committee, I appreciate all of the due diligence that you've done to try to preserve as many trees on this property. I walk by this every day, and it has some.
Oh, no, I've lost.
That into consideration.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I too want to commend the property owners for their effort to do as much as they possibly can to maintain the tree canopy at that property. I think that's vitally important to our city. And also thank you for addressing the concerns that we had last time we considered this preliminary review. And I don't have any further comments or questions on this. We do have Tom Evans, who had indicated that he would like to speak on 21 Saint Lawrence. Mr. Evans, did you have any comments or questions?
Or is he here?
He's here.
Okay.
Tom? Tom, did you? Hi.
Here it is. You got me? Did you say you heard me?
Yes.
Okay, because I can't hear much here. No, I'm passing on this one. I'm waiting for the next. Thank you, Rick.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I guess if there are no further comments from the public. Pardon?
Stephen Kaufman has his hand up.
Oh, okay, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted, I'm happy with this subdivision. I just wanted to comment on the memo that Glenn did. I agree with him. I do think that the section needs some clarification in the future so that an owner can enter into an agreement with a potential builder to act as an agent for the owner, subject to the subject to going through the petitioning application requirement. The way it is right now, it appears that only one of two ways can go. Either the owner would have to file the application and take it through and then enter into an agreement, or a builder would have to actually buy the property and then take it through an agreement. I mean, through the process. So I think the section should have some clarification in the future that you could enter into an agreement with a potential builder buyer who would act as your agent to take it for the owner through the process, and thereafter there would be a sale. That's a very normal thing in the real estate world. That's just my thought.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Anyone else?
Rick, I don't know if Steve's comments are in context now. We did have the discussion last week about that issue, as well as the Hickman Street subdivisions previously. But I don't, the document that we're talking about is marked in such a way that I didn't know it was going to be discussed here today. Privileged confidential.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that we probably should not discuss. Glenn, you want to
understand?
Sure, yeah. Obviously, the contents of the document are attorney-client privilege, so we wouldn't want to talk about the substance of the memorandum I provided. I do think the comments, though, are interesting in that this application and the one before has put a little bit of a spotlight on that code provision, and it probably does need some modification to allow for, as the development world has gotten more and more sophisticated, so have the documents that go along with it. And so what was contemplated back when that provision was initially written, I don't think probably contemplated this sort of an owner-builder agreement. And I do see some value in modifying that code provision to more clearly address these different types of documents.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jeff?
Yeah, I would add to that simply from my own personal experience and observations, and commenting on what Mr. Becker said and what Ms. Maka said. The generational change in families for property that's owned jointly is very difficult to resolve. And I had said at the earlier meeting, I'm delighted that a family has found a way to stay in Rehoboth instead of departing, which I see that most usually do.
Okay, anyone else? Well, yeah, I do think now for the second time, this provision has been highlighted in two successive applications. And I believe that we would all probably build a consensus, as I've heard articulated in the past, that our code needs a substantial rewrite. And I'm hoping at a meeting soon to put on the agenda, consideration of beginning a process in the Planning Commission to identify areas of code for improvement and to make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. And I believe this will certainly be one of those provisions that will be included in our recommendations. So with that, if there's no other questions or comments, is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move to approve the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, granting final approval pursuant to Chapter 236, Section 236-9 of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 2001, as amended, of partitioning application 0220-02 for the property located at 21 Saint Lawrence Street, lot numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, block 34, tax identification number 3-34, 20.06, 75.0. And that was a mouthful.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weber, could you call the roll, please? I believe we have agreed on these types of matters in the virtual meetings to do roll call votes.
Mr. Trunzo,
Yes.
Mr. Covington,
Yes.
Mr. Hunker,
Yes.
Ms. Matcha,
Yes.
myself is a yes. Ms. Lucier,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
and Mr. Perry.
Yes. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Becker.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As is indicated on our agenda, items may be taken out of order. I think, given the discussions I had with some of the counsel for applicants yesterday, I'd like to take up now the concept review for a partitioning request for the property located at 54 and 56 Rehoboth Avenue. This is item 7A on our agenda. I spoke with Ms. Pete yesterday, and I think the amount of time that they will require is a shorter period of time than other matters. So if we could move ahead, Mr. Molina, are you going to present for the city on this particular item?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. For the purposes of this report, I just want to acknowledge that this report was written for the April 9th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting, and it reflects the building inspector report written as of March 13, 2020. Nothing has changed or requested by the applicant since that time. So I want to move forward and basically establish that this is a sketch review for partitioning, request number 0220-01. The property owner is 20 Rehoboth Avenue LLC, -215 Marshall Street, Milford, Delaware, 19963. The purpose of this request is the applicant wishes to partition lot number 20 containing 54 Rehoboth Avenue Unit A and 56 Rehoboth Avenue Unit L, located at the same address, into two lots, with parcel A, Unit A, of 2,044 square feet, and parcel B, Unit L, of 2,956 square feet. Both proposed lots will face Rehoboth Avenue. The partitioning has been requested by Fereniki Zukalas, tenant at 54 Rehoboth Avenue, Unit A of the property. The general plan reflects a side lot line traversing lot number 20 is being requested to be located at north 07 degrees, 20 minutes, 41 seconds west. The existing structures on lot number 20 will remain the same if the proposed partitioning is approved. The zoning is C1. Lot number 20 containing 54 Rehoboth Avenue Unit A and 56 Rehoboth Avenue Unit L are identified as tax parcel number 3-34-14.18-31.01, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. You have the attachment of the applicant, aerial photographs of lot 20, Sussex County property information for parcel ID, same 20 Rehoboth Avenue LLC, parcel ID 334-14.18-31.01A, Harry Zukalas, boundary survey plan and proposed parcel partition plan dated January 16th, 2020 from 10 Miller Foresight Services. The project description, if the partition is approved, will create an eastern portion of lot number 20 becoming parcel A, consisting of 2,044 square feet with a 100-foot easterly side lot line, a 100-foot westerly side lot line, a 20.44 northerly front lot line, and a 20.44 southerly rear lot line. The east side building wall is 0.3 over the abutting property. You have the gutter is 0.9 over. HVAC ducts are 2.6 over on lot number 18. The front side building wall is 0.7 over city sidewalk. Western portion of lot number 20 becoming parcel B, consisting of 2,956 square feet with a 100-foot westerly side lot line, a 100 easterly side lot line, a 29.56 northerly front lot line, and a 29.56 rear lot line. The west side neighbors, there's a neighbor eve encroachment of 1.2, and the front side building wall is 0.4 over city sidewalk. Based on the survey submitted, the proposal for each lot will result in an area less than the required minimum of 5,000 square feet. A 4,000 square foot rectangle with its shortest side measuring 48 feet cannot be fully contained within each proposed lot.
Okay. Thank you, Dom. Ms. Peets, do you want to present for the applicant?
I do. I want to confirm that the applicant's son is actually on the call. I see his name listed, but I'm not sure if he's appropriately connected.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm listening in.
Okay. All right. Great.
This
Thank
is
you.
Costa.
Rick?
Yes.
I have a question. My screen just came up and it says, Ring Central, want to see a whole new way of doing online meetings, visit Ring Central. How do I get out of there? Back to the meeting.
We can see you. See if there's
Yeah. I mean, I can see you. I mean, we've got visual.
I've seen the documents in the building, and all of a sudden it went to a commercial for me. And
Oh.
I X out of it. I guess I can X out of it and sign back on.
Max?
I think if you X out of it, you'll stay.
Yeah, I think you can X out of the commercial and still stay, or just click into the video window itself.
Okay, I'm gonna try that. I might lose you, but if so, I'll sign back on. Here goes. Okay,
Still here.
Okay.
All I have is a small little column.
Well, yeah, I think everybody does because we've got the.
All right, good. Okay.
Okay, Kenzie, you can go ahead now.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Mackenzie P. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Tunnel and Razor. I'm here today on behalf of Robin Hood Restaurant. Applicant Mrs. Sakalis is the owner of Robin Hood Restaurant. I believe the property record still reflects Harry's name. He passed away back in 2017. And her son, Costa, is on the call and video today. The applicant is here before you for a concept plan review of a proposed partition of lot number 20, which is further identified, as Mr. Molina stated, as 54 and 56 Rehoboth Avenue, where Robin Hood Restaurant specifically sits, as well as Sensations. I have shared my screen with you. Are you able to see the?
No. Oh, I can't. I still see Dom's.
I see the screen.
I see the screen.
Well, I saw it a minute ago.
Are we looking at Robin Hood and Sensations?
We're looking at Robin Hood.
Yes,
Yeah, and then you're scrolling up at the moment.
I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So before I present on the proposed partition, I would like to have Costa speak at this time to provide Robin Hood's decade-long history in Rehoboth, and then also the applicant's motivation for partition. Costa, you can take the time to go ahead and speak on your behalf.
Yeah, thank you, Mackenzie, and thank you for all the preparation you've put into this presentation today. And I want to thank the members of who we're speaking with here. My family is, I'm the second generation. Mom is the sole owner of the business known as Robin Hood Restaurant. My parents purchased this business in 1968, and we have continuously run this business for 52 years. So on a personal level, I've grown up here. I've grown up in this business. I've grown up in Rehoboth, attended Rehoboth Elementary, and came back after college. So when my parents purchased the business, they also happened to acquire the structure. And I don't know how this happens. One of those things that happens in old Rehoboth ways, I guess. So we actually have title to our improvements. So when they bought the property, when they bought the business, we also have the building. So I think it shows up. Amanda, please let me know. I think it's referred to as Unit A. So we have title to our improvements. The family that owned the property underneath of our building, Lot 20, it basically is Unit A and Unit L, with Unit L being Sensations, and we're Unit A, Robin Hood Restaurant. We pay rent to the family that owns it. We've been doing that for 52 years. We're on great terms. Gentleman that owned the property, he inherited it from his mom, passed away recently. And now the heirs, I believe there's four heirs, have recently taken possession of Lot 20 Rehoboth Avenue. We have been in negotiations, and they have expressed interest in selling just our part of the land underneath of our building. And we actually are in great terms, and they're willing to sell us just our part of this property. But we're not willing to sell us the whole 50 by 100 lot, just the part that's underneath of Robin Hood. So what we're asking today is that we reunify the improvements of Robin Hood Restaurant with the property. So if you would grant us the right to partition, and I know it's an exception, but I think we have a unique circumstance here. 50 years of history, continuous operating business. If you would grant us that, we would be interested in acquiring our part of this property, and we reunify improvements with the land underneath of us. And that's what we're asking for. And if you could grant us that, we would appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to Amanda, and she can take over from here. I've done give you a little background on who we are and what we're looking for. And Amanda, if you can take over, please. It's all yours. If anybody has any questions to me, I'll be more than glad to do my best to answer any questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Costa. So I'll keep moving forward. So as stated, Robin Hood has operated in Rehoboth for decades, and an opportunity has presented itself for ownership of the land where Robin Hood sits. An applicant is before you specifically requesting your review of the proposed partition of lot number 20 into a 20 by 44 foot by 100 foot lot where Robin Hood is located, and a 28 by 28.56 foot by 100 foot lot where Sensations currently exists. And with rental increases in Rehoboth, it can be difficult to maintain a presence in Rehoboth, as some of you probably understand. Fortunately for our client, as Costa explained, Our client has always had a remarkable relationship with the landlord and has an opportunity to purchase this roughly 2,000 square foot portion of lot number 20 to own the land where the Robin Hood structure sits. As you can see on the existing site survey, there are currently 2 separate buildings on the lot. Unit A, as Costa stated, is actually identified as Robin Hood, and then Unit L depicts Sensation's location, and the proposed parcel partition changes nothing structurally on the site. Not only are there separate structures, there's also separate tax map and parcel numbers already, and all that will happen is the change of ownership and, as Costa stated, the reunification of Robin Hood structure to the land. To conclude my presentation, I would just like to draw your attention as well to the City of Rehoboth tax map. And if I could. So along Rehoboth already, you'll see that there have been other lots with similar partitions, it looks like, that have been done here. So specifically lot 7, 9, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 clearly showed to have been partitioned historically, and some of the lots are even smaller than the one that we are proposing, particularly with frontage being less than that's being proposed for the particular partition here. And with that, I'll leave that on the screen, and I would like to end my presentation and welcome the commission's questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Mike?
Yes, I do. And it's really to Glenn. In a situation like this, Glenn, is the protocol appropriate where I'm ill at ease about approving, quote, a variance, if you will, to the standard that's required? But is this similar to a situation that we had with the Avenue in a little slightly different variation, where we're supportive of it, but it requires Board of Adjustment decision to permit variance to occur?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it is similar to the Avenue. The Avenue came to you with, remember, they called it a code compliant plan and then a what we want type of plan, recognizing that they would need variances from the Board of Adjustment to be able to accomplish that plan. The Planning Commission reviewed the plan and kind of gave it its blessing. They went to didn't approve it, as I recall.
Right.
They didn't even approve it conditionally. They said, go to the Board of Adjustment. You've got our favorable review. Then they came back after the getting the variances for an approval from the Planning Commission.
Correct. That's what happened. I think, David, there was either a letter on our behalf or he was there personally. I forget now. It's been a few years. Voicing support of it in the context of the CDP. And this is one of those examples. In fact, it was an example back then with the Avenue Hotel, where to build it to the code would have resulted in, quite frankly, a hell of an ugly situation. And where doing something that was more in concert with the CDP would end up in a much more favorable situation and a benefit to what I guess you would call the livability and the nature of Rehoboth Beach. I think this is along those lines, and I would opine as well that in other situations in other cities around the world where you've had evolutionary factors which have resulted in these rather odd facades where the what would normally be a 50-foot requirement, you have buildings that are 10 feet and 8 feet, literally. This one's actually pretty good. And so I would vote in favor of it from the standpoint of being part and parcel of what makes Rehoboth Beach going forward. I would, though, raise 2 questions that from the standpoint of the physicality of the building inspector's report indicates that there are some conflicts in terms of the installed infrastructure on that structure. And so my question would be, even though philosophically I agree with the parting of the ways, I think that the infrastructure, being HVAC, would in fact have to be compliant within the physical confines of the new lot. And I guess I would raise that as a question as well to you, Glenn, if that's a necessity, either a practical one or a legal one.
Yeah, I think that it is an issue in that it may require, there may be an opportunity to get a variance for that as well. But I'm trying to recall whether we have, and Dom, you might be able to, I think we have a provision. I can't put my finger on it right now, but I do think we have a provision that says you have to contain everything that's necessary to your operation on your lot. So if this parcel were separated, there would be that requirement unless it could be achieved through a variance. But I'm not sure if it's part of the zoning code that requires it or the building code.
If I may, I think that we had discussed this previously. We are aware of the fact that we will need variances definitely for this project. And I believe that everything had to be contained within per the building code specifically. And Dom, you can, Mr. Molina, you can correct me, but I believe that we talked about that and Costa understood that as well.
I think from my standpoint as a planner, and for Rehoboth Beach, I think the subdividing it is more than acceptable. But I think the physicality of the infrastructure and the HVAC that relates to it has to be fully contained within the property limits, period. And that I would segregate out those two positions.
Right. And Costa does understand that the HVAC could have to be will have to be corrected as part of that.
No, this is Lee Weber, and I just wanted to say that I agree with Mike. I think this is a textbook case of an exceptional practical difficulty in front of the Board of Adjustment for approval. Obviously, it's a situation that evolved over years and years and years, and I think it's perfectly appropriate for a variance to subdivide the lots at less than the minimum standard. And with, as Mike said, with the exception that the physical improvements are contained within the individual lots.
Rick, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I'm very sympathetic to this application, but I wanted to ask the attorney a question. Did you consider having a partial sale of the lot by meets and bounds description without the need to subdivide? And also, along with that, an easement for the utilities, rather than going through the variance process.
Yes, we've talked about that option. We also talked about condominiumizing the lot as well, but the preference here is to go forward with the partition if possible.
Okay, I understand. Assuming that you do go through the variance process, you may still be able to use an easement for the utilities.
Okay.
Instead of a variance.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Any other commissioner comments or questions?
Yeah, I do. So if this has to go to the other board, is it too early for us, or are we just giving our letter of approval so when it comes back to us, it's good? Is this I mean, we all seem to be in agreement that this is a good idea. What is our action here? Is it that we give it the thumbs up and then they have to go out and get somebody else to approve it?
Well, this is not an application that is subject to approval or denial at this point. And as a concept project review, it's appropriate for us to make recommendations. And Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong, but we could send the applicant on their way with, if the Planning Commission decided to take this action, recommending that the Board of Adjustment, act favorably upon the variances that they need in order to move forward with the partitioning. Is that a correct statement?
That's right. So this is at preliminary review stage. So you couldn't grant it today, even if you wanted to, because it still has to go through public hearing. So it's going to come back to you again anyway. So the process that's been developed previously and you followed before is you hold this concept review or this preliminary review. To the extent you're supportive of the project, you could take a motion and a vote today through means of correspondence or through means of the chairperson going to the Board of Adjustment hearing, but to show a level of support from the Planning Commission for the granting of the variance, which would then allow you, after a public hearing, if you still are in favor of it, to grant the partitioning.
I would certainly favor taking that approach.
Myself.
I would agree.
Everyone else feel?
Yes, I agree.
I agree with you.
I agree with that also. One of the things I wanted to talk about, what I like about concept review is we have a chance to talk about what we would like to achieve and the CDP, and not just deal with what the law says. And there's a couple of concepts I think I just like to talk about for a minute. I was looking at this as what is the public good to support this sort of action, because we are in the commercial area and the public. And we've heard from half of the ownership group about what the private goods are for them. And I'll just enumerate some of them. They have a long track record running a successful restaurant. We all know that businesses that own their land are more likely in it for the long haul and have a better track record for Rehoboth. So that's pretty clear. It's not necessarily necessary for us to hear about the other half, but I am a little bit curious. What are the possible bad implications of subdividing a lot that's larger? And one of them came to mind right away is the potential for future underground parking. So, if we split a lot this size, when it comes time for redevelopment, it's pretty unlikely that a 20-foot proposal would ever have underground parking. So I think that's an ephemeral potential issue out there. The other thing that I'm not totally, I guess I should phrase it the other way. I really like the idea of diversifying ownership of the commercial properties, because I think more owner operators have more involvement in the city and are more likely to work with other institutions like Main Street to make the overall concept successful. So they have more skin in the game. So I think that's also another public good. But I have to say that we have two single-story buildings that may or may not have certain charm elements that fit into a downtown that's vibrant with, different sizes and shapes and finishes of properties. So I guess if we had a downtown historic area that reflected all these characteristics of all the different size lots and what they bring, I would be 100% for this. In our current situation where we don't have anything that guarantees preservation of some different sizes, when it comes time for redevelopment, we don't know what we're going to get. So I'm 95% in favor of this, and of course I like it. I like everything about it, but I just don't think we have everything that we need to have to make sure that the good things we have today last into the future.
Okay. Jeff, anyone else with any further comments?
Sorry, Jeff, I just have a clarification.
Please.
Are you suggesting that we could have more of a historic preservation group to review these types of situations?
I think as part of the comprehensive development plan, we have to come up with some sort of zoning, planning, specifications that preserve some of Rehoboth's charm. It's that same old issue again, that we just have to think about what we're going to end up with as the pace of redevelopment continues.
Are you
these small lots? These small lots are great. I mean, this is a big part of what we have, and I had decided not to say this before, but I will say it now since I know it's been said publicly many times at other meetings. But there are folks even on the Board of Commissioners think that in this very block in a certain section, there are lots of small lots, and folks think that, they're not really meeting the need of the commercial zone and perhaps not in the best of shape, contribute to the charm, the atmosphere, that sort of thing. I'm just trying to air those issues.
Okay. Thank you. I certainly don't disagree with anything that you've said. And I do think that that's something that's appropriate for us to consider as we move forward in the process of the CDP that, we are currently working on. We don't currently have an architectural review board, to handle matters such as this. I am at least pleased that Robin Hood and Sensations will still look as nice as they do on Rehoboth Avenue and will remain a part of our downtown community. And I believe that what they're proposing to do is at least consistent with maintaining the harmony of the existing buildings, as well as being consistent with the neighboring properties. So, I would certainly look upon this favorably. Glenn, do we need a motion to authorize, sending a letter or authorize me as chair to go before the Board of Adjustment when the applicant seeks variances, or how do we handle that at this point?
So I think I would do a motion sort of in the alternative, where the motion would say, I move that we authorize the chairperson to send written correspondence to the Board of Adjustment in support of variances to allow for this partitioning. And the alternative, or in addition, he also is authorized to appear before the board at his discretion. Something as simple as that.
Okay, is there a motion to that effect?
Yes, I will make that motion that that we put together correspondence for the chair of the Planning Commission to discuss with the Board of Commission, the adjusters in support of this granting of variance.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
And before you vote, can I just mention, Mr. Chairperson, that this, of course, does not preview how you all will vote on this application. It's simply indicating that at this point, the variance will be required. There may be things that come up at the public hearing that cause you to change your mind. So your mind is not made up at this point, but you're at this point supportive of the variances that would then allow the process to move forward so you can give it full consideration.
Thank you for that clarification, and I agree. And this is the process I think that we would like to see applicants utilize, coming to us first with these concept reviews, and if they do require variances, going with our support for those variances. But understood that this is not an approval or denial or an approval with conditions whatsoever for the proposed project.
Thanks.
Mr. Weber, could we do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Mr. Strumzo,
Yes.
Mr. Covington,
Yes.
Mr. Hunker,
Yes.
Ms. Matcha, Rachel?
Yes.
Yes. Joyce, or Ms. Lucier?
Yes.
Mr. Strange?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
And myself is a yes, and Mr. Perry?
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you to the applicants and their counsel. And, we'll move forward in accordance with the motion that was just adopted.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Yes.
Just a point of clarification, because I cannot see everybody.
No, I can't either.
Who seconded that motion?
I did, Mike Strange.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, and Mackenzie, can you take down the sharing? Okay, great. Okay, I'd like to, again, we're sort of taking these things out of order, but based on, the time considerations that I've discussed with the applicants, I'd like to move back to an old business item, which is item 6B, continuation of the concept review for the proposed Belhaven Hotel properties located at 2 Rehoboth Avenue, lots 2, 4, 6, 17, and 18 block, Rehoboth, and lot numbers 3, 5, 7, and 9 block, Wilmington. The property is owned by the Papa John family and will be represented by Alexander Papa John and Peter Falat of the Lot and Architecture of Baltimore, Maryland. I also believe, is their counsel also on?
So we're. I've lost everybody. Yeah. Did the rest of the members have video now?
Yes.
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 I lost everything when Mackenzie got off.
We can see you, Barry.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
All right, I can't see anybody else, so.
Try clicking, do Alt Tab, and on your screen we might come up.
Okay, Alt Tab.
And all your screens that are open will come up. And then click on where my shining face is.
This one's supersized. Alt Tab, right? Instead.
Alt Tab together.
Yeah.
That's the sign of chocolate.
Okay, there. Is that okay, or do you want the big version?
Do you need the other? Make it big.
Yeah, if you hold down Alt and just hit Tab, it'll show all your screens open.
Report, do you?
Oh, okay. No.
See, that's chocolate.
No. Our audio is on, so everybody can hear us.
Good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
What's a small icon? So I'm back on.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Molina, are you going to present for the city?
I just want to, can everyone hear me still?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to refresh the memory of all the commission members as to this project. It first came before us as a sketch plan review for the meeting held on Friday, April the 12th, 2019. The proposal as it came in was for a redevelopment of 38,475 gross square foot of land as a single structure for a 4-story hotel with 13,822 square feet devoted to retail use. The hotel at that time was intended to provide 121 rooms consisting of 76 double queen and 45 king dwellings throughout second, third, and the fourth floor. The project was also to include 38,600 square feet below ground garage for 110 spaces and 11 spaces at level, a restaurant of 3,750 square feet, plus 1,588 square feet of restaurant service. What has not, that has changed since then. So now the project is still the same gross floor area, but it's a single structure for a 4-story hotel that will accommodate, as it came in on the first review because there has been some modification since the writing of this report as well. It came in to provide 112 rooms, and the retail space was removed. Since the site is definitely in the C1 commercial, the use is permitted, but it has this restriction because it is located in a special flood hazard area, which is a combination of two flood zones, an A and a V. And when the flood zone it has a combination of a V, the more restricted V zone applies to this location. So the elevation that's required for this location is 12-foot base flood elevation, but according to our gross floor area, it has to be 1 foot higher as a result. I just wanted to say that since the writing of the report that was completed on May 21st, 2020, the applicant has made some revisions. And I want to direct you to the first revision in the drawings that were submitted on we received May 29th, and the date of those revisions are dated on 5/28/2020. Does everyone have a copy of that, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What you'll find, so my report is part of it goes out the window because the applicant responded to my report to become more code compliant. So now the garage parking, the garage structure is not below grade as they was originally proposed. It is still now at grade. At grade. And the area by ground floor, second floor, and third floor, that has been reduced to by almost 6,000, by almost 6,000 square feet. 6,000 square feet. And that was because, again, the V zone would not allow a underground structure. And therefore, it would allow parking to be at grade level, providing it could be accommodated under the building and the area is open. There are some use restriction on the site, and that will be the restaurant, which that needs to be resolved with the applicant as to how they're going to incorporate that lounge area with the restaurant selling a liquor that may or may not be associated with the restaurant. The height regulations, the applicant proposed a 42-foot height, but last week it was interesting. I got a call from Mr. Evans, which he and I discussed, and there was what I would say is a typo error after I discussed with the applicant that the height was originally taken from the curb and not reflected on the was indicated to be taken from the curb and not from the center point of the Rehoboth Avenue. The applicant also, to that effect, made that modification and submitted a revised drawing dated 6/10/2020. Does everyone have a copy of that?
No.
Yes.
Okay, good. We're moving along. They also made some modifications based on my report of June 12th, because they were increasing, they were over lot coverage by 6%, and now based on the latest drawing of 6/10/2020, they're now at 50% based on calculation, and the FAR, which from my original report, they were well over in FAR. They have come in at FAR at 1.83, which is acceptable. The lot area per dwelling is still good. They don't have front, side, or rear setback requirements, which is 0. There's no need for a buffer area. One of the corrections that they made was the storage of refuse, which is now you can see on both. Well, I will refer to the 6/10/2020 drawing, and you will see the refuse is to the bottom left of the site, trash service. And I would question Mr. Filat on this, that the stripe area, is that where you're proposing to have your storage tank, your propane that's located at the site?
If you'd like, I can answer that, and I would say potentially yes.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. They do meet the minimum based on the reduction of units. They went from 107, they're down now to 103, we're 104 parking spaces. I did recommend to Mr. Filat that because the handicap area, which is not part of this review, is more of a building review, they need to be closer to the entrance. The accessible parking that's around the trash service area is too remote, and that I can make recommendations and subject to their review that should be closer to the shuttle lobby area, either along Rehoboth Avenue or immediately adjacent to the other accessible parking located that they're proposing. If they're going to have that ground level parking, that has to be screened, and there eventually has to be a consolidation of the lots if the project is approved as well. I will recommend that this development should be integrated to reflect recommendations made in the comprehensive plan, and that strong consideration be given to the drop-off of hotel users on Rehoboth Avenue, because that area is extensively closed off when they have events at the bandstand as well. They did made some modification to an entry walkway, which that exists in the previous drawings as well. Mr. Chairman, I have completed my review. If you have any questions, that you will have the police and public works comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Molina. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Molina? Yes, Jeff.
I have just one question. Dan, you can answer it, or as long as we're going to get it in the presentation, I'll be fine with that. But I've been through the free of obstruction requirement brochure several times, highlighted quite a bit of it. And I've looked at the drawings, all the different versions. This is probably my shortcoming, but I don't understand 1 foot, 1 foot more. Eventually somebody has to just explain, is that from the height of the boardwalk, the height of the street, the height of the curb? Where does it hit in the building? I just don't understand. 1 foot more is not anchored for me, so I need a better explanation of that.
It's a concept that sometimes appears confusing, can be confusing. But you have a grade level, and the grade level among the 3 lots vary by 11 foot to the highest being 12. Okay, so you basically pick your highest point, which is your finishing point, which will be 12, and it has to be 1 foot higher than that for base flood elevation. You get your base flood elevation, and then you're basically 1 foot above that.
Not 12 foot above that, 1 foot above that.
Minimum 1 foot.
Okay, thank you.
1 foot. Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Dom at this point? All right, does the applicant want to present their?
Dom, Rick?
Yes.
Hey, it's Lee Weber. I just got unmuted. I had one question for Dom.
Okay.
Okay, Dom, I unfortunately have not read the FEMA information that you sent, but are you prohibited from building period in the B zone? Or are there methods to do it, but they're just much more involved than it typically would be?
Well, what is prohibited is any underground construction, any below grade construction. You're not restricted from building, but the construction requirements for being in an area primarily affected by high tidal waves, such as the V, requires much restrictive building requirements than if you were not there.
So you can do it, it's just more involved.
That's correct.
That's my understanding as well, and there are mechanisms in place with FEMA to get approvals to do below grade, yes, it does take a little bit longer, and there are more parties involved, but it's not an absolute prohibition.
Rick, I have a question.
All right.
Yes, yeah, Rachel. Rachel, we can't hear you.
I'm off mute. Maybe I'm on mute by.
We can hear you.
No, you're okay now.
Thank you. I do have a question, and if this is in the presentation, it can wait. But I did read in the police commissioner's report that around the safety aspect of cars pulling up on Rehoboth Avenue of unloading or loading passengers, there was a concern there around safety. Yeah. I didn't see a recommendation, but I'm sure it would be addressed by the folks here, or I'm sure you're thinking about it. I just wondered if you had responded to that.
Mr. Plot, well, I guess we'll hear about that after the applicant makes the presentation. Who is going to make the presentation for the applicant? Who wants to start?
These would be three of us, Hal Dukes and Mackenzie. They're going to make the initial presentation, and then my father is going to speak, and then Peter Falat is going to present.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
Sure. Hal?
Hal?
I think they're
down here.
They're muted.
They're muted still. Mackenzie and Hal are muted still.
Are they still with us?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Okay. This is a follow-up to a hearing we had almost a year ago. It's been a number of months since our last hearing. And during that time, the Papa John family has directed a new design for the project to consider the suggestions made by this board, some of the public comments, and a significant amount of help from the building inspector and the building department in Rehoboth, as well as the construction standards of the industry. So at this point, I think it's best for Mr. Papa John to make a few comments, and then we'll let Mr. Follett go ahead and make the presentation. He has all the technical answers that you're looking for. John?
Yeah, yes. Please pardon me. I have some tree and grass pollen allergies, and my voice sounds sometimes like I'm talking from the bottom of a bucket. It's just a hoarseness. In our first presentation, I tried to go into some of the family and historical background as to how the property was acquired. But there has been a change in the commission, so I don't want to go over all that because that would just be too time consuming, I think. But for those who were not privy to it, I'd like to just touch on it briefly so I don't bore to death the people who've already heard the original. My dad came over here when he was 19 in 1922, opened a restaurant in Philadelphia, worked 7 days a week up there. 10 years passed. He went back to Greece and married my mother in 32. And he left the restaurant in the operation of my Uncle George, who had George's French fries on Rehoboth Avenue across the street next door to Louis Pizza. Anyway, he married my mother in 32, came back here. I was born in Philadelphia in 1933. The property was purchased in 1938 by my father and my mother's two brothers, James and Chris Trajos. 25% a piece of them, half to Dad. Then in 47, they split the property. During that time, as you well know, maybe in Georgetown, the deed showed that they were the owners, but the real owner was the bank because they bought it in its third bankruptcy. Can you imagine? 1938. That's when the FDR programs for the Civilian Conservation Corps went a little somnambulent. And it was only because we were supplying the overseas British and all that we got into some some economic advantages so that people started coming down to the shore. So it was sort of luck in that sense that after a third bankruptcy and working 12 hours a day, they succeeded. Then in 1947, the Trajoses and Papa John split. The two brothers wound up with the Carlton Hotel, which is right in the middle of Rehoboth Avenue, that 4-story, 4 or 5, I think it's at least 4-story building, a brick side, a front building. And it was on an income basis. So the boardwalk property that now is in the Trajos family name, from Gus's all the way down to the middle of the boardwalk, heading for Rehoboth Avenue, is Trajos. And the Papa John part was what we call the Belhaven property. It's where the hotel was basically, all the way down Rehoboth Avenue. Now, there's a lot of things that happen in between, so I won't go into all that. The point is that years and years of real 12-hour days, 7 days a week, summer after summer, the shoulder seasons were not what they are now. It opened on Memorial Day, which we call Decoration Day. And I mean, you could go out and lie down on Rehoboth Avenue the day after Labor Day and not worry about getting run over for a half hour. That's the way it was. When I was a little kid, it was cinders, a single lane road coming all the way down the middle of Rehoboth Avenue with a railroad track. And we called it cut over towards Wilmington Avenue and Delaware Avenue to the south, right there, what we call the railroad station, Snyder's was. That building is out where the Historical Society is now. The society itself is in the ice house, what we call the ice house. And that's the little building in front of it in the parking lot. So I went to Rehoboth Elementary School, walked to school, no buses, snow, forget it, don't worry about it. Just walk through it hip deep, all the way across the golf course, which is now become a housing development. So there's a lot of sentimentality built up in our family regarding what we had to go through in order to pay that thing off and all the years of work. So the incentive here is not just economics. Obviously, that is primary. After all, when you look at that space above it, you know, in economic theory, you have opportunity cost. Every year that goes by that space is empty, that means you've theoretically lost X amount of dollars because you could have developed it. So now we started thinking about 4 or 5 years ago, should we develop it? What should we do? Motel, whatever. Then within about 6 months after we talked about it, we got contacted by some people. I don't know whether they're in Williamsburg or Virginia Beach. They have motels in Myrtle Beach, all up and down. And they had come to town, apparently, done some research. They wanted to purchase our property, number one. Well, no, it wasn't for sale. And then we suggested to them that they go talk to the Fosnauts, which is, we figured that's a big enough area, maybe to put in a motel or something, or maybe even the Trajoses, either on Rehoboth Avenue or maybe, I thought, on the boardwalk. Well, they weren't interested in selling. They came back and told us no. So that was the end of that. then we started thinking, well, maybe we ought to start doing something. So it's been 2.5 years we've been in this. Now, where are we? Well, we came here and we said, we've got an economic opportunity, but we're doing this because we want to set something up that is sort of a heritage for the Papa John family, and also to have something that the city can be proud of. Something on the corner that when you have a postcard, you have dollies, you have the gazebo in the center, and you have a really nice looking place here on the south corner. Now, what has happened is, and frankly, I'm disappointed myself. I don't like the second proposal myself, personally. But you have to fall back on what is economically feasible. I was sort of surprised that we, for example, couldn't put in a parking lot underground. Now, I didn't know what FEMA's requirements and all, I hadn't researched it, nothing. But I understand, and it's still the case, and maybe I'm wrong, I stand to be corrected, that the city does not permit in the code somewhere that you cannot have underground parking. Now, whether that's based on what FEMA requires or whether it's a rule and reg that the city requires, I don't know. But in any event, when we saw that we couldn't put in underground parking, at least after that first presentation, it threw everything into a cocked hat. Because economically, if you don't have underground parking and you're going to run into this FAR problem with porches being considered part of the FAR and swimming pools probably in the FAR and all this, it cuts down the number of rooms you can put in. And that's why I say I don't like this plan that we have here at all, really, because it's street parking and it kills the number of rooms you can put in and their size. Okay, the average room to me is like when you go stay at a courtyard or something out on the highway going to Florida, wherever. It's 12 by about 35, including the bathroom and all. Most of the rooms in this thing are, I think, around 300, maybe a little less. That's a small room, okay? So what you're going to wind up with here, if you can't put porches on it because of the FAR and all that, you're going to wind up with what I call a Motel 6. A microtel, a night's inn, that does not look good at all. So, but we have to do it because we have to adhere to the code. So that's my position, basically.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Chairman, do you want Peter to wrap everything up and then take the questions, or what do you want to do?
Yeah. Well, Peter, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll move on to questions, comments from the commissioners.
Okay, I'm going to push the share my screen sign here, and hopefully that'll happen. Okay. Does everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, I see it.
And can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go through the drawings that were submitted, but I'm not sure who the new members of the committee were, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a trip backwards because I'm not sure if you guys, if everyone has seen some of the historic images of what the Belhaven looked like at the corner of Rehoboth Avenue and the boardwalk. A few of these early images, former arts and the Historical Society sent us. So you can see, and what you're going to look at here is kind of a building that changes over time. Some of the older images show a building that has a porch all along Rehoboth Avenue, and we don't really want to get into the specifics of how and when it changed, but you can see that there's the two-story building with a big hip roof and a finial here, which is one of Mr. Papa John's favorite elements, as well as a sort of I think, a 3 or 4 story building in the back that was also.
Well, I have 5 stories, let me tell you. It looked like 4, but it was 5, Peter, because I went up and carried a lot of mattresses there. They had to have a step up to that first floor that was almost like 4 feet because they wanted allow a lot of air underneath because of the dampness so that it would dry out. So it was actually taller than 4 stories, almost 5. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But fine, that's great. And so I just want to show everyone these images because they really are beautiful images. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's primarily an all hotel here solution, right? John, there was no retail shops at this time.
No, this was a dining room where all those series of cars in the left part of the picture there, that was all a dining room. And there is a dishwasher and all, yes.
And then the other thing is there was no parking on site, right? It was all building, right?
Oh, yeah, no on site at all.
Yeah, no parking on site because those requirements came forward much later in the 20th century. We had a big discussion about finial or no finial and should that be part of the height limit requirements or not. So this is a close-up of the finial, and we estimate it was about 9'8" tall and maybe 5 feet across the base. Here's what the site looks like today, as we all know. The gazebo, terrific gazebo. This is Wilmington Avenue. These are the 2-story walk-up apartments.
No, that's Rehoboth Avenue.
This is corner of Rehoboth, right? And the boardwalk. And then this is Wilmington Avenue. And you can see, we all know it's a 1-story retail commercial strip with no parking on site. Going backwards, just 1 second. Again, here's the site at the very end of Rehoboth. Sorry. And this is the site plan that shows the floodplain lines. Okay, so this is the V zone in this corner here, and this is the A zone here, and this is the AE zone here, the X zone and the A zone. And what we have learned from Dom's report. Sorry?
Can you go back over that again? Because you were ahead of the picture on the screen. Go over the zones again.
Okay. So let's see.
You were at the boardwalk and Wilmington Avenue.
So,
let me just. The problem is I can't control everything with this stupid visible panel on the side.
Yeah, so we're looking at the plat right now, the topography plat.
This is the plat right here. So this is the VE zone is this corner here, which is the highly restrictive zone. In a VE zone, you can't have a dwelling unit above underground parking. Parking is not allowed to be underground in FEMA whatsoever, okay? The X zone and the AE zone, which is what this zone is over here, both allow underground parking for, and have to have a occupied space above, okay? So a highly prohibitive zone is in this corner right here, and it's based on an elevation of 12, okay? The thing about this is we have the opportunity to maybe move this zone through a LOMAR application, okay? So if we, and we believe that based on the fact that this zone line was brought in and probably measured in the 60s. If you remember in the 60s, this was all low, and that's probably what the zone line was. Now it is not like that. The dune is 13. And we believe that if there's a possibility and the FEMA agrees with us, we should be able to do a line of map amendment, which will allow us to move this line over to here, okay? But we may not, right? So if we can't, then according to city code, if a portion of the building portion of the site is in the VE zone, then the entire site is to be considered in the most prohibitive manner, right? So as it stands today, we're moving forward with the concept that we cannot have underground parking and have a use above, okay? So that would be a residential use or a hotel, all right?
I guess, can I stop you there for a moment?
Sure.
So what is your plan or expectation? I mean, is the applicant going to attempt to get a LOMA and get a waiver from the VE designation? Or
no, we wouldn't get a waiver, Rick. What we would do is they would redraw the line. They would modify the line, and they would say, okay, well, yeah, the line is actually out here. Okay, this line would move out here, and this zone our site would not be in a VE zone. It would be probably the X zone. So this line would move out to there. Okay.
And if the line moves out to there, correct me if I'm wrong, you would be able to have the underground parking.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. Thanks.
So just
wait a minute, Mr. Chairman. I thought the code says right now we cannot have underground parking unless we get a variance.
No, there's no variance.
Yeah, what's the code say?
What does the code say? Is really a question.
Mr. Langford had to get a variance to have his underground parking, from what I understand. So even if we move the line,
No, he
don't
did not.
need a variance.
I don't think that's correct, and I don't believe there's a variance requirement. Dom, correct me if I'm wrong.
There was, Mr. Langford is not on a V zone. He's actually in the X zone, which is more desirable than for both of these zones. What the code says is what the code's restriction is taken from FEMA and incorporated into Chapter 159, and it says the same thing as FEMA. If you're in a V zone, you cannot have any underground structure, regardless of if it's for parking or anything else.
But if FEMA agrees to move the line and it's no longer in a V zone, then there isn't an issue with respect to underground parking, correct, Dom?
That's correct.
But it counts against the FAR, right, Dom?
No.
It won't, well, unless you get a variance.
Well, that's
the problem.
That's the problem, right?
But I think you need to go through this process to understand what's going to count as gross floor area in this and your FAR, and you know, maybe the Board of Adjustment will take a more lenient look at not counting structure. Now I understand that underground parking may be removed as a structure for commercial use with and that is before the mayor and the commissioner as an ordinance.
That's what I was going to comment on. The Board of Commissioners is currently considering an ordinance that would no longer count underground parking as gross floor area. So if that moves forward and the Board of Commissioners adopt it, the underground parking would not create any additional gross floor area to be included with FAR.
Mr. Manos, do you know the timetable on that?
So they have, it is on their agenda for this month, Friday next week. I anticipate, but I'm not certain, I anticipate that they may schedule a public hearing at that time. That public hearing would be in a month or so. It's a little bit of, slower process based upon doing things this way. But once that public hearing is held, they could adopt it as soon as the following month. So it could be only a couple months away from adoption. It could be a little bit longer. The issue with that ordinance is that there's a few different elements to it, and it's not the underground parking creating problems. My sense is that most of the commissioners agree that the underground parking should be removed from gross floor area. But there's a couple other elements to the ordinance that they're struggling with that may cause the pace of that ordinance to move a little bit more slowly. So I think this Friday's meeting will be pretty instructive as to which way they're going to go.
All right.
So let me just add, Rick, we did submit a LOMA, which is a lead line of map amendment, and we were denied, okay? We subsequently met with another civil engineer, and we were advised that we don't want to do a LOMA, we want to do a LOMAR. We don't want to do a letter of a map amendment, we want to do a line of map revision, okay? So now we are in the process of doing a line of map revision. And that application process is happening. We expect it to take 3 to 6 months. That's the status of that.
So I guess my next question is, but let me just cut to the chase on this, because there's been a lot of time on everyone's part, both going back to last year when we had this to what we have now, which quite frankly, in my view, is a non-starter, if you will. I mean, understand that something can be code compliant, but there's another document that's very important to take into consideration, and that's the community development plan. And what is proposed, this concept project review, is in my estimation totally inconsistent with the objectives and intentions of the comprehensive development plan that is in place currently. And I struggle with how to even move forward on this at this point, because it is so inconsistent with what needs to be addressed. You can go to the CDP on page 92, and it clearly states that a key to the maintenance of the variety of use and diversity in architecture is the addition of site plan review by the city to the commercial building permit process. Particular attention will be paid to issues of pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular access, architectural harmony with surrounding structures, landscaping, and environmental impact. I see very little, if any, harmony with the existing structures that is the iconic location of this property, with the boardwalk, Rehoboth Avenue, and the ocean. I couldn't even try to construct a response to this where I could come up with conditions that we could impose if we were at the approval stage that would make this work. And I guess I would suggest that maybe it's time to go back to the drawing boards again. But I don't want the planning commission to be boxed into a corner here with something before us that is so unacceptable from the get-go that it pushes us back to doing something that is more acceptable to you, which may have been the earlier proposals. I think this planning commission, and it's unfortunate, I think this was a bad way to get started with the current planning commission. The planning commission as currently constituted, I think, is very open-minded. I think we are flexible, and we want to work with applicants to achieve the applicant's desired objectives, but we will not lose sight of the objectives and intentions as expressed in the comprehensive development plan, which does have the force of law by statute. And so I I don't know what you want to do. I spoke with Hal the other day. I don't know if you want to withdraw what you've proposed here. I don't know what the other members of the Planning Commission feel. Maybe wait for the results of the Board of Commissioners' consideration of the ordinance that they're looking at now, which, if adopted at least with respect to underground parking, does eliminate underground parking from the calculation of gross floor area, and how that would change things for you. But I understand from a business perspective the economics. I hear you on that, but I can't ignore, at least I can't, the loss of all of the retail businesses that exist there now and have what amounts to a parking lot on the corner of Rehoboth Avenue and the boardwalk, with cars visible and a chain link fence, presumably, or something similar to that, where just a parking lot is going to be the only thing visible from the ground level to people on Rehoboth Avenue and the boardwalk. And so I guess you tell me how you'd like to proceed, or I'll open this up now to comments from the other commissioners. I don't know how they feel, but perhaps it's time for them to weigh in as well.
Rick?
Yes.
I have a question, Barry Covington.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the original proposal is better than the one we're considering now?
No.
No, I'm not saying it was better, but in concept, it was more in keeping with the objectives and intentions of the CDP in terms of maintaining the character and the livability of our downtown Rehoboth.
Is that because of the businesses underneath?
But it's not just the retail. I mean, that clearly, in my view, is part of it. But even from an architectural standpoint, in my view, what is being proposed now is something that is just not in harmony with the existing architecture in the city, and particularly in that area of Rehoboth Avenue.
Rick, can you hear me?
Yes.
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 All right. I want to thank you for bringing this up right away without spending hours going over things. There is no way that I could possibly vote in favor of this. The parking really is the first thing that I saw, and that's beyond salvation. But I just think the question is this is one of the most important pieces of property in our town. And I'm sure there has to be something that could supply both sides very well. That could be in concert with the city and what its vision is. Plus, it could be financially feasible and viable and successful. And I don't know what that is, but this just doesn't do it. This is not a starting point. So I thank you for cutting to the chase, and let's see, something constructive.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I am in total agreement of both you and Joyce on this as it relates to the architectural piece, and I wasn't on the commission before, but I think that's when I opened the packet and saw, this latest design, I was disappointed. I actually would like to see something that's a little bit more in keeping with what the original structure was. I get that there's codes and, variances and whatever we'll need to work through. Hopefully it's more codes than anything, but I guess in my mind, if parking is such an issue, and in my mind it is, because I actually like the concept of retail on the first floor and not have the parking in the cars closest to the boardwalk that you're looking at on that block. Can we look at remote parking? Is there an option that we've considered that, folks, come do a drop off and someone takes the car away just like you do in bigger cities? But I mean, my experience here in Rehoboth is you really don't need a car once you get here. There's lots of opportunity just to walk around and stroll the town. So in my mind, I just wonder if there's another way to still, come back to something that is in keeping with our town and fit in beautifully, with the landscape of Rehoboth and the charm that we have all wanted to and rethink the parking piece, which may open up more possibilities.
Thank you.
Rick, can you see my hand?
Who was that?
It's Steve. I raised my hand. You see that?
No, I can't see everybody at this.
Okay. Well, if I could comment for a minute. First, I want to say that I reviewed the past proposals just so I was in context with what had gone on before. And I am in complete agreement with what you said and what the other commissioners have stated. I think that I'm very sympathetic also to the family and what they want to do in their long history. And I agree with Rachel and the others that something can be found. I really feel that it would be prudent to wait until the commissioners deal with this current legislation in front of them concerning FAR and potentially underground parking, and also the results of the modified application to move the flood zone line. What comes to mind to me right away is the nice job that was done at the Avenue, where they retained the retail, and they did put in some underground parking, and they were able to stay within the height limits. I mean, unfortunately, this substantially, materially impacts the retail commercial core of the city, and is not in compliance with the comprehensive development plan. And it's also a really good example of why we need to update the comprehensive development plan and consider some ordinance changes both to the zoning code and also to our building codes. And I want to thank you, Rick, for your comments, because I think they were very well done.
Thanks, Steve. Mr. Follett, can I suggest that you take down the presentation for the moment, since we're in the discussion part, because it's easier if we can then all see each other.
Sure.
Thank you. So I wanted to emphasize what Rick said earlier. The previous Planning Commission, and probably many, if not all, members of the Planning Commission, even before the year that I joined, had identified very early that a FAR requirement that requires parking for every parking space you have was completely illogical and a complete disincentive for what we want to do. So I feel like that concept has really permeated through the community, and in a town that has such high peak parking demands and frustrations, underground parking and solutions that we don't have today are really key to alleviating that. And I was thrilled when the Belhaven proposal came in, because here is an addition of underground parking on a scale that's probably not even possible in many other locations. So we've really been instrumental in pushing this forward. And of course, laws don't change as fast as we would like them. And I can't predict what they will do, but the Belhaven isn't the only concept that's been affected by that aspect of the law. And as Rick said earlier, we're looking forward to the public discussion of those, because I think even more people will weigh in at that point in time. That's critical. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that there has been so much infrastructure investment in protecting the downtown area. The dune, the grasses, the rebuilding, the replenishment. The Planning Commission last year had a presentation from Denarec that really explained how all these things work in harmony to protect the city and to protect the investment and preserve the town and the beach. We are not a town if we don't have a beach. So we expect those investments to continue. And I would hope, and I think that people on lots of level once they understand the situation of the Belhaven, would be interested in helping that application for, I want to say it right, Lomar, Lomar, to get that line out of there and into the dune grass or in front of the boardwalk or someplace else. That just opens up the whole world for what everybody wants to see.
Yes, Mike?
Yes, if I may, I sort of held off to the end. I happen to agree completely with Mr. Papajohn's observation that he doesn't like it.
Yes.
By the same token, I didn't like the other one either for a whole series of other reasons. And I would like to read another part of the CDP, particularly with regard to the downtown, and that is that it says to avoid outsized and inappropriate development that can crush the fine-grained urban fabric that makes downtown Rehoboth Beach attractive in the first place. And I think there's several things happening here, some of which are under our control, some aren't. We're also making some tacit assumptions that are very limiting, which don't need to be. But I think it's important in light of the current pandemic to really, it brings home the fact that we look at all the barriers that were put up to try to invigorate the ability to have retail and the restaurants to be able to survive, creates its own problems. But by the same token, a series of problems that Rehoboth is operating under has nothing to do with us, and it has to do with the years of neglect by Sussex County with regard to their urban planning. And the result of that has been issues that are impacting the city that we have no control over, will continue to impact us in the future, and may in fact be driving some businesses out of town because they can't survive. And that's because the people that want to get into the town really can't. And we'll just raise one thing to put it in perspective. At Del Dot, with the elimination of red lights outside of town through the length of Route 1, basically in the next few years, you're going to be able to go from Wilmington to Lewis and never stop. And on the surface, that sounds good. But the reality it means that everybody piles up in Lewis and Rehoboth, and suddenly what's going to happen from an urban planning perspective, which has happened around the country in other areas, is people are going to start saying, Jesus, this is such a pain in the fill in the blank. And they start going elsewhere. And they start not coming into Rehoboth because though it's easier to get to other amenities, even though the beach is such a draw. And this has happened in other communities around the country, particularly beachfront communities. And there are good examples of that have repeated themselves over and over. So we'd like not to have that happen to us. And even though there's some things that have happened we have no control over, we do have control over our own destiny. And one of the things that's been alluded to several times has been with regard to DENREC and regard to FEMA and with regard to the parking and underground and everything else. And I would like to say that we're looking at this, quite frankly, bass-ackwards. We shouldn't see it as underground parking, but we should see it in a whole nother vein, which is a seawall. There are wonderful examples in Holland where they built what looks like a dune. And in fact, it has underground parking. And in our particular case, with what Mr. Papajohn would like to do is, in my opinion, with a better design, is you in fact could have multiple levels of underground parking by accident. It turns out it's a seawall. FEMA is not particularly creative. And if you look at all the regulations, they're nowhere near what's being done in other countries, particularly Holland. Those are the kind of things we need to look at. We don't need to reinvent and go backwards. We need to go forward and have more creative solutions. And right now, even what's being considered is really not sufficient. So what does that mean, and what's my observation? I think the current plan obviously is a non-starter from my perspective as an urban planner. In Rehoboth Beach, it needs to be different. It needs to really be in greater agreement with the comprehensive development plan. And what's important here is we constantly refer to the zoning and building codes as the law. Well, it turns out the CDP has the force and effect of law. You have to meet both. You can't do one without the other. Building codes, unfortunately, and the zoning code, which is a wonderful 5-inch thick document for those of us that still have the book, is made so that you don't screw up in a big way. But when you look at it, you can screw up in lots of little ways. And the net result is you end up with something you didn't want, and it's not what you really desired for your city and your town. We're in that situation. Rehoboth is going through a spurt right now, again. It wasn't always this way. It's not what many of us remember. It's also better in many ways than what we remember. But we'd like to keep that in a very positive vein. So I guess my recommendation as a planner, from the standpoint of being on the planning commission, is that I would love to see the Papachon family be able to monetize and get the value out of their property in a way that does two things. One, it maximizes their potential success and their financial rewards, and also is completely complementary with the comprehensive development plan of Rehoboth Beach, and achieve both objectives at both at the same time. I think right now, what's been happening here is we went to two extremes, the far left, the far right, up or down, however you'd like to describe it. And we didn't come up with something that actually is much more forward-looking solution that satisfies several different objectives. Now, the thing that I just proposed with regard to the possibility of having more underground parking, not less, would in fact require a different perspective and would take longer than if you take the plain vanilla route, which is where things seem to be headed. So that does in fact have an economic impact. It means it might defer for a longer period of time the monetization that the Papachon family would like to have. But it could, in a very big way, through a public-private partnership, the city, DENREC, the feds, in taking a different philosophy here and coming up with a much better solution that ultimately benefits all of the community. I'll shut up.
Thank you, Mike. I've thought a lot about this as well, and I've talked with Mike in the past about what they're doing in Holland. And yes, it is an undertaking that would require more time and more parties' involvement, but it also is an opportunity to do something that greatly enhances the viability and sustainability of our community. And someone will want to undertake that. Mark, I saw your hand up.
I have not, having been on the commission the first time this came around, I'm trying to find the disconnect between the last one and this one. Is the last one more palatable if it was underground parking like the Sands has, or and the retail was kept? I'm trying to figure out the is there a method if they got the Lomar? Is that something that opens up the discussion again, or is this a CDP kind of world here? I ask that because I think Holland and all those other places. I was just in Belgium, well, before we all were locked down, where there are a lot of people that do not use cars, or they use trains and public transportation, but we're not that society right now. So somebody coming to this town, I'm not opposed to adding hotel rooms in the town. It has to be done right. But you're not going to get someone here to ride the old train like they used to right down the middle of the street of Rehoboth Avenue. So I'm just, are we looking for better continuity and weaving into our community? I agree about the beach, Rehoboth Avenue. No retail, no beautiful places to go, no walking promenades. I'm in on all that same. But are we saying that we don't need that kind of space here? I'm trying to figure that piece out.
So if I could, Rick, for a minute, sure. just respond slightly. And we are really happy to hear your opinion and your stance in regards to the CDP. We believe that our first submission really responded and was reasonable because the CDP sort of teed up that kind of solution, okay? The previous planning commission took a look at the 6 variances from the current code that would be required to create a mixed-use development on this site that's sympathetic or similar to the CDP, and just it was really a very difficult situation. And we will admit we thought that proposing a rooftop venue would be a good idea for this site too. So maybe we went a step too far, okay? But, I think that the Papa John's, and if you go back to the testimony that was made in those in those meetings, we really feel like, and I think that Jeff's comment is probably mostly right, and that is to have the parking drive development, the parking requirements drive development in cities and towns has been something that most places have moved away from. And you already in your CDP, it sort of tees up a form-based code, but it doesn't follow through on it. It's a notion that you should have a form-based code, but you still have these high parking requirements, and parking is included in the physical space of the building, right? So, it's really we welcome, we apologize for insulting this commission in its first meeting. Okay, it's a different group. We're glad, right? And so I think that there's an opportunity to work together. And if you can understand what our problems are with the current code and how we could begin to solve and create a project that we'd all be proud of, I think that that's definitely what, in speaking for the Papa John's, and I don't think they're going to yell at me about this, that we are all for that. Okay, so this is basically a design that says what's the worst thing that could happen on this site by right. Okay, you're looking at it.
Absolutely agree.
It's completely by right. Actually, it could be uglier. I could have made it even uglier, but I didn't. I have a little bit in there, not much. Just a little. So anyway, so I think that there's a willingness here on our side, and if there's a willingness to rethink about how we handle the parking requirement, like take it out of the FAR, whether it's below grade or above grade. Okay, think about whether or as Rachel is suggesting, could we have parking off-site? Could we, if we arrange parking off-site, then we wouldn't have to put it on this primary piece of land. But that would mean that some part of Rehoboth would be wiped out and there'd be a surface parking lot or a parking garage, and which is a whole nother can of worms. But I do believe that we may get a LOMAR. I hope we get a LOMAR. But if we don't get a LOMAR, what are we going to do? And I think that that's the question that us as the design and development and ownership team, and you as the planning commission, we should try to solve that together here, because this project could really be a great asset for the Rehoboth. And I think that's what the Papa John envisioned.
Let me just follow that up just a moment, because I want people to understand our motivation completely. Over almost 20 years ago, I started getting involved with the Historical Association because I had moved back into town from Mount Vernon, Virginia, where I'd been living for quite a while, and became a citizen again of Rehoboth. And why I emphasize that is I joined and got involved with the Historical Society because I really wanted to have something in Rehoboth that really I thought was a great idea. Let's bring the history back. Let's so that people understand it. And we're all gone 6 feet under. They'll have a record here of what happened. Pictures, stories, artifacts. I even have wicker furniture from the hotel in my house here in Seabridge now. And that was made, I think, in the 1920s. Still strong as the Battleship Missouri. But anyway, that's why when I looked at this and said, look, we're going to be spending a lot of money on this place. And, even though Rehoboth is very popular and we all know that, and Washington, D.C. people come here, lower Pennsylvania and all that, still, it's a big investment. And it's going to cost, just to put in the underground parking, $10 to $12 million more is the estimate, just for that. For the nicer rooms, another $4 or $5 million to decorate them, to attract at that time, this is 2 or 3 years ago, Hilton or Hyatt or whoever we got involved with. Then we started thinking, well, maybe we just want to do it ourselves and have the old Belhaven and not have one of these people that are, nationwide, Marriott International and all that. Oh, just have Belhaven Hotel on there and we'll run it as a family. May not do as much, but we'll do some business. So the point is that I'm making that is not just an investment. To me, it's also an investment in bringing a place in that all of us can be proud of as citizens, as a family, and that can wind up on postcards or wherever and say, that's a nice place. And secondly, and just as importantly, I feel very badly if the tenants had to go. I've had associations with them for 30 and 40 years and close associations. So to say that from a financial standpoint, this is the only route we can go, but the tenants have to go, it tears me up, frankly.
Well, thank you. And I certainly appreciate your comments and your passion, which is why I suspected, and you have confirmed that you don't like this proposal either. And so I think we're pretty much all in agreement that no one really likes the proposal. And as I said at the outset, and I've said ever since this new planning commission, has been, put together, that we are looking at things a little differently. We're flexible, we're open-minded. We certainly want to see you achieve your objectives of both putting something on that property that you can be proud of, that will be on the postcards, and at the same time achieve, an economic return for you on that property. And so I think we need to find a way to work together to see what we can do. I know I'm certainly willing to be, think outside the box, on these things. And I think most of the other, I think all the other commissioners are willing to work with applicants to achieve the best thing for you and to achieve the best for the city.
So Rick, how should we go forward then? How do you envision going forward? Because, what we would like to do is almost like a work session that we could talk about the previous design, the pressure points, and and what we think, or you think, or the commission thinks is a reasonable ask in terms of a variance and what they would support eventually, because it hasn't been very clear to us. Matter of fact, it's been clear that it's completely not clear. So the way the boarding adjustments sort of hears variances, but there's this whole confusing. So we would love to have a work session or figure out a way that the commission and the ownership design team could come up with something we think is the right solution and is economically feasible. And maybe it's something that we look at and we have a session and we say, okay, if it's below grade parking, it's like this. Below grade parking the project. So how would we handle it that way? And I think that those are we would really like to move this ball down the road. And so how do you think we should move forward?
Mike, you had your hand up. Did you have a suggestion?
I was going to suggest that I think it actually, the model that we had when we did it with the Avenue is appropriate. And that really ended up working. It was a back and forth working sessions, and they were public. But we were able to voice ideas and concepts because everyone on the commission comes from a different perspective. I mean, we have engineers, attorneys, and in my case, urban planning or in engineering. And it helps enhance the solution. I think the thing that's very critical, obviously, if the I'm sure the Papa Johns don't want to wait a couple, 3 years to monetize this investment, to see if we can get DENREC and the feds to look at parking from the standpoint of being a seawall. And oh, by the way, you can park and you could have several hundred cars there. That'd be terrific. And for downtown, it'd be fabulous. That's not going to happen overnight, although I think it's possible to do it because we've seen other countries be successful in that area. I think what we can do is look at it from the standpoint of the first submittal was completely out of scale with the comprehensive development plan, and it required, I think, 11 variances that you guys were going for. I think
it was a lot of variances.
Yeah, I think what you really want is a mix to come up with a design that is in consort with exactly what the Papa Johns would like to see from the standpoint of their objectives, which I think are laudable, and fit within the CDP, which are successful. And I think one of the critical areas, and Peter, you probably have a lot of experience with this. I mean, if anyone travels outside the United States, some of the best hotels have no parking whatsoever. And you're attracted to those hotels because of what they are and where they are and how they are. And I think that in this particular case, it would be totally appropriate to come up with where the number of spaces doesn't equal the homes. If in fact the economic analysis shows that it makes sense for the clientele or a portion of the clientele that would be coming. And that opens up a lot of possibilities. So I think it's doing the right thing as opposed to doing what the code requires, which in some cases going forward is actually a bad thing.
Yes, Steve?
Well, I agree with Mike that we should have some work sessions, whether they're public or special sessions, whatever the code requires. But the first two things I think we need to get is we need to have the results of their application for the LOMAR. And we also need to find out what the legislation decision will be by the commissioners on the FAR legislation. Both of those two things are critical in my opinion. The last thing I'd like to say is, we're working on this comprehensive plan. One of the things I'd like to see coming out of that is the change so that not every application needs variances. I'd like to have some zoning changes that would be much more flexible so that the commission can make suggestions without the need for variances. I think the city way overuses variances. Variances are really for real economic hardship, and I like to get away from that. So those are my thoughts.
Yep. Jeff?
And, Peter also mentioned that our current CDP foreshadows form-based code, which I believe it does in some of its intentions. And I think the discussions we've had already for proposals, this one and other one, as well as the CDP discussions, indicate that there's a lot of support for moving in that direction. Architectural review, those sorts of things. It seems as though everybody is unifying around the idea that we have to make the whole work as well as the individual parts. It needs to come together. I'd like to say something about public opinion, just for the benefit of the Papa Johns and for Peter as well. I usually hear from a few people about proposals that are coming in for discussion, but I'm sure you're probably aware that public opinion is not on your side for the current proposal, and that's why you heard such strong remarks from the chair. And it isn't so much a trade-off of one for the other. Well, I'd rather have the old proposal than the new proposal. I didn't hear those types of things. I heard much more substantive comments that we should all be working together to get something that works for the whole town, for the Papa Johns and for everyone else. One comment from one of the previous meetings really has stuck in my head the whole time, and that is one of your immediate neighbors, Allison from Go Fish. She explained that she would be hugely impacted from the construction, but she supported the proposal because she thought in the end it would be worth it to bring more people in this block year-round downtown, and everything, the keeping the businesses, having the hotel rooms, having a destination, having something stunningly beautiful in this location would help her. So she is willing to suffer for a year or two that it takes to get through the construction process. And I think we should remember that, because people like her are her boots are on the ground every day. She knows what it takes to be successful. And her comment just really resonated with me and still does today.
I do think that we need to move in the direction of having working meetings and see if together we can form the kind of public-private partnership here to bring about something that meets the Papa John family's needs and also will encompass their laudable expectations. It is clear how much you love this community and how much you love what the past was, that's something we should all be working towards, and blend the past with the future. But the important thing is for us to be looking forward and to be addressing the unworkable provisions in our code at this point, and try to come up with something that will work for everybody. So I would simply suggest that we talk offline, work with the city solicitor, and we'll see how we can proceed. But I just think that we won't accomplish anything if we just try to deal with the current project concept that has been presented. Mr. Papa John, Alex, are you willing to move in that direction?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I do have one question though. From what I understand, the current zoning ordinance does not include a mixed use provision. Is that the case, or is there a mixed use provision? Because we're really proposing a mixed use development here, right? It's got some retail, hotel, meeting space. And it's kind of difficult to propose a mixed use development when you're trying to conform to single use provisions. So does the current zoning ordinance have a mixed use provision? And if not, will your commission add one?
Well, it does, and Glenn, you can correct me, it does include a mixed use authority, but it's somewhat limited.
Right.
But I think we are considering, in the context of the current discussions for the new CDP, addressing mixed use in the downtown commercial area on a larger scale. And so, that is something that's under current consideration. But Glenn, would it be necessary under the current code provision for the Papa Johns to have the type of mixed use they're talking about with retail hotel space now? Or would that be, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's probably a way you could do it. The issue, and you touched on it with our code, is that there's some allowances for mixed use, but there's not a whole lot of incentives or encouragement for mixed use. And the commissioners have talked about, Commissioner Caluzzi especially has talked about a desire to see a way to encourage it and incentivize it rather than just have what we have now, where it's sort of allowable, but it's kind of just, piecemealed into the code ways that you can do it. So I wish I could say there was a current proposal on, pending before the commissioners right now to make a mixed use scenario an easier endeavor. There isn't. But I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's something that can't be done. Dom, would you agree with that analysis?
I agree. There's it's one of the points I made earlier in my first report that we don't have a real mixed use ordinance other than what's presented in section 270-21. And I understand that we need to look for more flexibility
and allowances, and whether all the other requirements should be in place as well, such as parking, because we should be considering other options along the way.
Okay, thank you, Don. Yeah, I mean, the Planning Commission has already, had a presentation and had discussion regarding mixed use, and in the context of the surveys that we conducted last summer, we got a lot of input and comment on mixed use, and for the most part favorable. So that's something that will clearly be under consideration as we complete the process of drafting a CDP. But obviously it will still take action by the Board of Commissioners to make some revisions to the code as it currently exists.
At some point, John, do you want to mention that you're 84 years old and you'd like to see this done in your lifetime?
I'll be 87 in a couple of weeks.
He was 84 when we first started.
Look, another thing I would like to mention briefly, because this meeting is getting very long for everyone. I just would really feel very badly if I saw Rehoboth Avenue and Wilmington Avenue and Delaware commercial areas go down slowly. And I encourage people, either take a bus or go by individual car, makes no difference. Cape May, going up to Asbury, New Jersey, it's almost like the Rehoboth of the New York City area. Just come back down the coastline and stop in those places, and you won't have to know anything about them, really. All you have to do is look and see who has been smart enough to be doing things like you're trying to do, which I congratulate you on trying to do something with the code that makes sense. And you can see the towns that did something, and the commercial area is nice. It melds with the residential area. They're nice places. And you can tell the ones that wound up with the E-Z loans, all those kind of places, all up and down their main concourse, and they went downhill and have still not recovered. So that's what I've been trying to avoid too, as well as everything else. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're probably all on the same page with you, and we all want to do the right thing for our community and for our property owners and citizens. So if it's okay with you, let me talk with the city solicitor and Mr. Molina, and I guess regroup and perhaps come back to you with a proposed working type arrangement to see if we can come up with a proposal that everyone can be happy with. Glenn, does that sound like a good approach?
Absolutely. I mean, anything to move the project ahead, in a way that's it's an iconic location. I mean, we got to get it right.
Yeah, we don't want to mess it up, anybody. Right, I'm with you.
Well, and I'm sure, and I believe that you don't. And I am confident that with this group of commissioners and working with you and with your passion, that we can get this done.
Thank you very much for your time and efforts. I've been involved in a lot of volunteer work too over the years, and I know what it takes to do this kind of work, and you don't get thanked very often, and I do appreciate it very much.
Okay, well, we appreciate that as well, and we're all volunteers here because we have a passion like you do for the community, and appreciate that. We do have, we had some participants who signed up specifically to talk about this issue, and although I think we've sort of come to a point where we're going to address this differently, I don't want them to not have an opportunity to say something if they would still like to. We did have Dr. Michael Trejos. I don't know if he's still on or not. If you are, did you have anything you wanted to add to our discussion today?
Yes, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I think the video is off. Is my video on or off?
Off here.
It's off here.
For the public, it's off here. Only audio.
Very good. No problem. Thank you. First off, I just wanted to, my name is Dr. Michael Treos, and I had originally had prepared remarks that I was going to make and provide the remarks for the record. However, because of where we are now in the proceeding, I feel that I will hold off on those prepared remarks for a future meeting. But I will just briefly make this one notation. For those new Planning Commission members who don't know who I am, I and my two sisters, Sandra Rootsis and Elaine Michelle, are the property owners in the southeast corner of the proposed area, which would be 7 to 15 South Boardwalk, as well as 1 Wilmington Avenue, which includes the stores of the Funnel Cake Factory, Tidal Rave, 5 and 10, Starkey's Ice Cream, Gus and Gus, Dave and Skippy, and of course, we've all been, our families like the Papa Johns, we've been owners of the Boardwalk, Rehoboth Avenue, Wilmington Avenue since the 1930s. But the point I just wanted to make was that I strongly would like to request and encourage both the previous and current new Planning Commission members to go back and look at the Planning Commission meeting of June 14, 2019, particularly at the 2-hour and 11-minute mark, which can be found on YouTube, where I made an extensive PowerPoint presentation with regard to the original proposal, the effects and the challenges as a result of trying to implement underground parking, along as a result, the AE flood zone and the high risk for liquefaction of the earth's soils underneath properties, including the hydrostatic pressure from the ocean that could affect also the underground stability of Wilmington Avenue. Additionally, at that meeting, our legal counsel also submitted prepared remarks, which are part of the record. Again, I would like to request that the current and new members as of this year, please go back and re-review those submissions to give you a very thorough understanding of where we are. That being the case, I'm hearing that there's going to be potential multiple meetings with regard to the development of a new set of plans. I would strongly suggest bringing in to those meetings immediate adjacent owners such as ourselves, because anything that's done is going to have an immediate impact on us and the Go Fish, that type of thing. And the immediate property owners should be part of the working group so that we are all on the same page as this development goes forward. And that's what I wanted to say, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Tom Evans, you had also indicated an interest in commenting on this particular agenda item. Are you still with us?
He's no longer with us.
No.
Okay. Jim Ellison, you also had indicated a desire to talk about this matter.
He appears to have dropped off as well.
No,
okay.
Jim.
Boy, I guess I sure know how to drive people away.
Go for Commissioner Shanowski. Yeah, see if he's in.
Oh yeah, did he ever sign in?
He never did.
Okay, I guess I drove him away too. So, anyways, well, thank you very much, and we will be back in touch, and let's be optimistic about moving forward to do something.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. I do have one question. So the work sessions, those are going to be public meetings, correct? So the general public or adjacent property owners could join the meeting similar to this, right?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Good.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, all of you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, guys and ladies.
Okay.
Take
All right.
care, everybody.
All right, thank you. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
I guess now let's move back to old business, which is 6C Comprehensive Development Plan. Debbie originally was going to join us. I had a conversation with her earlier today, and decided that given our heavy agenda, and she was only going to try to do something for a few minutes anyway, but I would just cover where we are. I had a conference call on Wednesday with the mayor, the city manager, the communications director, and Debbie to talk about where we were and what we still needed to get accomplished. And we have a draft which Debbie will be sending out with some more detail than was on it this morning. That is a comprehensive development plan sort of schedule of dates to accomplish each next step moving forward. And what we're really looking at based on our discussion is that in mid-July, we will be presenting to the commissioners general goals and strategies to review. That's the next big step. And after that comes the internal rough drafts and reviews of the actual plan itself. We have concluded that we have enough information and collected enough data at this point to move forward with drafting, doing a rough draft of the CDP plan, and then hopefully through the public comment process. Well, first we'll have internal comments that will be incorporated also into a draft proposal that will be presented to the commissioners as well, and at which point it will be released for input from the public. And obviously the public will have opportunity also to continue to have input and to comment on our draft proposal. Unfortunately, it looks like no matter how we slice it, because of COVID-19, we may not, clearly we're not going to meet the real expedited objective that we set out for when we first reset our approach. A lot of things happened, the cancellation of the expos and whatever, but we're still not probably far off the mark. But what we want to do is get this draft schedule that will have a tentative schedule A, a tentative schedule B of dates, and depending upon how things go and how many additional special meetings we feel we need for public input or for even our own consideration of the draft of the plans, we'll have to adjust this accordingly. But this will help, I think, provide us with a little better idea as to the timing of certain aspects of this, and when we're going to need some special meetings and how many. I do believe that probably in September, we will need at least one special meeting dedicated solely to the CDP, probably another one in July as well. But that will become a little bit clearer after we have the presentation of the initial general goals and strategies. So I expect that Debbie will be getting this to us, so that each of us can take a look at it and provide some input on the schedule, be prepared in July to discuss it further with Debbie. You had your hand up?
Yeah, can we get this in hard copy, not just electronically, because I would have difficult time printing the whole thing. I'm sure it's going to be many pages.
Well, the schedule itself is only 2 pages.
I thought you said she's going to send us a rough draft of the document.
No. The rough draft of the CDP isn't ready yet. That won't be until probably mid-August.
Got it. But when we do, I would like to.
We'll make note of that. Certainly, yeah. It is a big document. Any other questions or comments on this at the moment? Okay, then let's move on to the next item. I believe is the
building inspector's
report. Dom?
Yeah, that was electronically submitted to
Right.
For circulation to the planning commission, and if I don't have a copy with me right now, but if there's, I know our revenue has gone down, of course, because of the situation that we're going through here. We have only been doing our work based on things that we get dropped off, and we respond. Hopefully by July, we'll have a better rebound.
Did anyone have any questions on the report that was circulated?
No.
I guess if not, okay. Thank you, Dom. Appreciate that. City Solicitor, your report.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll mention is back on the topic we discussed earlier. You know, this ordinance on gross floor area does continue to percolate at the city commissioners level. The issues really that are slowing it down are not the underground parking. As I said, I think that there's strong support among the commissioners to remove underground parking from the gross floor area calculation and thereby take it out of the park calculation. One of the things they're struggling with is, for example, whether balconies should be excluded from gross floor area. Should they be incentivized? Should they not be incentivized? So they're really struggling with different types of embellishments and outdoor spaces, and which of those spaces should count as gross floor area. So if it was just purely an ordinance dealing with underground parking, it would probably move pretty quickly. And they've talked about doing that, removing everything else and just dealing with the underground parking. It could still happen, but we'll know more, I think, this Friday. But I think they will take action on some form of an ordinance before Belhaven is far enough along in the process, you know. So I think the timing will work out both of those issues. But that's all I wanted to mention. The ordinance continues to be there.
Okay, well, let's hope that, does work out.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I have a question. Sorry, I haven't really heard an update on the code rewrites. Is there any work being done on that, or is there a project plan for that?
Well, that was another topic that I discussed or commented on at the last Board of Commissioners meeting, and again expressed my displeasure at what I consider to be too slow a timetable for revisions to the code. I review and rewrite. I hope that one of these times when I bring that up, it will resonate, because the basically 3-year timetable to do a rewrite of the zoning code and building code is, in my mind, totally unacceptable. And something needs to be done to expedite that, which is why I said earlier that I was hoping that, I know we have a lot on our plate, but I do think we need to focus on us as the Planning Commission and individually as planning commissioners to really start working on identifying those areas of the code that need to be addressed, and to provide those recommendations to the Board of Commissioners at the earliest possible time, so that, you know, once they have those recommendations before them, hopefully it will be easier for them to address on a more timely basis than is currently contemplated. Yes, Jeff.
I make a suggestion. Well, I just want to put a thought out there, because
professional.
In regard to the parking, you know, if I wonder if the Board of Commissioners might want to hear from the Planning Commission about what we've learned about parking today, meaning that perhaps if the ordinance that Glenn told us about earlier does appear to be stalled, whether there could be some encouragement to pull that one piece out. And the one piece I'm talking about is the one that's affected a couple of our bigger proposals. The underground parking counted as far. But I heard from quite a few residents in the past 2 weeks on social media and other places, and people were shocked that a surface parking lot could be proposed for the Rehoboth Avenue thing. So I think that idea is out there that we may perhaps never want to see that again.
I think that's probably true, at least from my perspective it is. Yeah. Any other comments? Yes, if not, future planning commission. Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
Has something.
Yeah, I was just going to say along with what Jeff said is that our building and zoning code can hardly be considered progressive in any fashion. And it's built up over time. And when we were just a small town that happened to be next to the ocean, it did okay. But in the last 20 years, and in particular the last 10 years, it's gone under extreme stress because the folks that want to do things have more knowledge and skills behind them than the code originally envisioned, if you will. And so it's been challenged at several levels with a multitude of things. And Glenn and I have been dealing with an issue along the same lines. And so it's going to stay that way. And I think to your point, Rick, is the sooner it's addressed and we start tackling it, the previous code was fine if you just wanted to build a house and you paid attention to the setbacks and that was it. But now things have gotten much more complex within societal structure. And it really needs, if we wait another 3 years or it takes 3 years to get there, in these ensuing 3 years, we're going to be really up the creek and a lot of bad things are going to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mike. Steve?
Because a comprehensive redo of the zoning ordinance will take a long time, I suggest that we consider a few amendments in the short term that would address both the commercial mixed use and also the need for parking, not just for underground parking, but perhaps the reduction of parking requirements, or even providing for parking waivers. In terms of the commercial mixed use, the city could adopt legislatively a commercial mixed use overlay zone, which could be applied on a case-by-case basis based upon benefits to the city in return for applying that zone. And I think we could accomplish that probably within the next year if we wanted to look at just a few, and the commissioner wanted to look at just a few zoning changes. And in terms of the comprehensive zoning ordinance, I mean, that really is going to need a tremendous amount of work. For example, if we did a form-based code or whatever. But in the short term, we could come up, I believe, with a mixed-use commercial overlay zone that could be applied on a piecemeal basis based upon threshold criteria being met.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. And what I had envisioned, frankly, was that our recommendations would probably be done in two different parts. The initial part being critical areas need immediate attention.
Right.
And then second set of recommendations would be the overall recommendations to do a complete overhaul of the entire code. And I think that we can't wait to get some aspects of the code revised and implemented so that we don't lose time, because as I've said before, this is the longer we wait, the longer or the shorter the time is that we will have a sustainable community, and we've got to do something to allow things to progress and move forward in a reasonable fashion.
We can even say that these are meant as a transitional, temporary, until we can look at the code overall.
Right.
You can put that right in your adopting resolutions that these things are transitional changes. So.
Agreed. Okay. Next item is future planning commissions and to discuss possible agenda items for the next regular meeting scheduled for July 10th. I don't know what we're going to have, whether or not. Obviously, the CDP will be an item, as I mentioned before, goals and strategies, and further discussion on that. And I don't know if there are any, Ann, are there any applications currently submitted that would be coming to the July 10th meeting?
I've received an application and plans for Rehoboth Spotlight Incorporated at 417 Rehoboth Avenue, and also an application and plans for Clear Space Theater at 415 Rehoboth Avenue for site plan review.
Okay, well, I have also received a letter from council to those applicants asking us to consider expediting the consideration of those proposals at a special meeting of the Planning Commission. So I believe, Glenn, is the notice period, or Ann, 15 days? I mean, public notice of a site plan, or
publication in the newspaper is 15 days, but I would need to have 22 because of the deadlines with the newspapers.
Okay.
Rick,
right.
could I, while you're thinking, I'm just going to talk out loud. You had mentioned earlier that we may need a special meeting in July for the purposes of the CDP.
Yeah.
I wonder if we should look at putting that special meeting on the calendar now between the July and August regular meeting, and perhaps do some agenda gymnastics like you did tonight. You know, perhaps July 10th could be, in effect, the special meeting request, and the special meeting 2 weeks later could actually be more of a regular meeting. I'm just putting my ideas out in the universe.
Sure. I mean, obviously the agendas can be, I mean, we have discretion over what we place on the agenda, and that's certainly a possibility. I guess I'd like to talk with Debbie about the impact of the timing on the CDP if we were to do that. I'm the one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is that if we basically push off a special meeting post July 10th to deal with CDP issues, that we may be embedding a further delay in the process by at least 2-3 weeks, which has an impact all the way down the line, as you'll see when Debbie gets us the updated draft of the proposal. But I guess let me think about that, and I'll perhaps circulate just to be sure. I know you've all told me what dates you were not available, at least for the next couple of months. And I think we're actually in pretty good shape in terms of everyone's availability, if it's still the same. But I'll try to also get from you an update on your availability, perhaps through September, to the extent you can look out that far, which would be helpful, I think, in terms of trying to coordinate with all the necessary parties dates to get all these things accomplished. And now, of course, we also have the possibility of these working sessions with the Papa Johns. So let me try and figure out how we do that, and get back to you if that's all right with everybody.
Yes.
And are there any attendance conflicts for July 10th or August 14th, which are the two regularly scheduled meetings coming up?
No.
It's July 10th at 3 or 1?
Well, I think that's going to depend upon what we decide to put on that agenda. My sense is, because of public interest, for example, which is why maybe a special meeting makes sense to consider Clear Space and Spotlight, think there's going to be a great deal of public interest in that. And so it probably is a meeting in and of itself. And so I would suspect that we probably, for that meeting, and if it is on the 10th, would probably want to be either at 1 or 2 o'clock at the latest as a start time. And hopefully, still be able to move things along. So I guess if you can bear with me a little bit until I can figure out which meeting date is going to be which agenda, then I'll have a better sense to a start time. If it weren't for the interest in something like that, if we didn't have an agenda like we did today, I would say we could go back to our 3 o'clock. But if you can just bear with me and remain a little bit flexible, I'll try to figure it out as soon as possible.
Mike is on again.
Mike, yep.
Yeah, I had a question. It really it's to you and to Glenn, because I kept about the concept we were talking about with the Papa John's having public meetings. One of the things that just as a general statement is many times what comes before us, it pains me because I feel that the people, when they came up with the designs or they came up with the input, that it was actually very limited because of who they talked to or when they talked to people, and it didn't have really the kind of global perspective you would like as a decision. And I was just curious, and I guess it's really a question for Glenn, to what extent can board members, if in fact the Papa John's even wanted it, could provide input to them or guidance just of a general nature based on your professional experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'll tell you that in Lewis, for example, they have a bylaw that prohibits a member of the Planning Commission from talking with an applicant or a person who's in favor or against. I mean, they have a hands-off policy. Everything happens in the public view. So you run the risk, I guess, if you are spending time with an applicant advising, you run the risk of evidencing some sort of bias through the process because they've incorporated maybe suggestions that you've made. So long as those things unfold in the public domain in a public meeting, I don't have much concern about it because that's an exchange of ideas that's taking place in front of the public. So I would be reluctant to be outside of the public meeting place having conversations with an applicant about certain things they could or could not do that would be favorable or unfavorable in your view.
Right. Okay. In that case, it's easier just to defer to the kind of meeting we're contemplating. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Probably not the most efficient way to get things done, Mike, but
that's what I was thinking. But
yeah, no, I agree with you, but that's a problem in our state statute more so than it is anything in the city code or our bylaw.
Right.
Okay. Any other comments from the commissioners? I don't think we have anyone else from the public. So I would be happy to entertain our favorite motion of the day.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, all.